Peace and love, black families. The Prince of Pan-Africanism, Dr. Umar Johnson, live and direct, South Africa. About to head on over to the Market Theater for tonight's presentation. I wanted to just talk a little bit briefly, if I could, about behavior modification, because I've been getting a lot of emails and questions from black parents asking what they can do to address misbehavior in their children without medication. So I just want to spend a few minutes discussing this before I head on over to tonight's lecture here at the Market Theater in Johannesburg. Number one, first thing black parents need to understand is that all behaviors only exist because you allow them. Let me say that again. All behaviors only exist because you allow them. Your child is only doing what they have been allowed to do. And the reason why it is difficult to modify the behavior is because it has become a habit. You have allowed your child to engage in the same repetitive behavior day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute, second after second. All behavior is a consequence of the context where it takes place and the consequences that follow. All behavior is a function of where it takes place and the consequences that follow. That is to say that no behavior ever stands still. I need you all to understand this, especially my African parents in America. You really, more than anybody else, need to understand this, because the American African child is under psychoacademic attack more than the children in most other European contexts. However, I would argue that in Canada as well as in the United Kingdom, we see the same extent, the same intensity of the war against black boys. But I want you to take ownership of your son's behavior. I want you to take ownership of your daughter's behavior. They are only doing what you allowed them to do. And in many cases, they are only doing what you modeled for them to do. Most childhood behavior was learned. It was learned from parents. It was learned from older siblings. It was learned from their peers. It was learned off television. But most misbehavior is learned. Children are not born to misbehave. They are not born to disrespect their adults. They are not born to not value their education. So you have to recognize that you played a role in this. You also need to understand that the behavior will only get better if you do something about it. The behavior will only get better if you do something about it, because behavior does not stand still. Behavior is always getting better, or it is always getting worse. Behavior never stands still. That means that if your son did not do his homework last night, you received a notice from the teacher today explaining that your son did not do his homework. When he comes home and you inform him that his teacher, Miss Slurbanowski, informed you that he did not turn in his science homework, if you do nothing about the fact that he did not turn in his science homework, guess what's going to happen? He's more likely not to turn in his science homework tomorrow. Why? Because his mother or father, and I'm going to say mother a lot in this conversation, much respect to black men, but 2/3 of our children are being raised by women, not by the fathers. But for the fathers, for the grandparents, for the foster parent, for the adoptive parent, I'm speaking to everyone, but you will largely hear me say she or mom only because most of our children are raised by the mother. But that is no disrespect to my strong black fathers out there doing the best that they can to raise their children, the grandparents and the adoptive and the foster parents, as well as siblings who have taken parental responsibility over their younger brothers and sisters. So behavior don't stand still. It's always getting better, or it's always getting worse. It never stands still. So right now, if you're dealing with a child who has a behavior challenge, my question to you is going to be, what are you doing about that behavior problem? Your child has a behavior problem right now. I don't care if it's Canada, Jamaica, New York, Los Angeles, Australia, Birmingham, Luton, Wolverhampton, wherever you are, St. Kitts, St. Croix, Kenya, where I'll be in 2 weeks. Shout out to Kenya. Can't wait to visit Nairobi. Mile, stand up. But the question is, what are you doing about that behavior? Because if you're doing nothing about that behavior, it's going to get stronger. Now, let me say this. One of the biggest ways to sabotage behavior modification is for the two parents, if there are two parents involved, to not agree on how the behavior should be carried out. This is very important. This is very, very important. So the mom believes that her son should get a second chance. The daddy doesn't believe in second chances. So mom and daddy are arguing in front of the child over the behavioral consequence. This is the worst thing that you can do. Never, ever disagree about behavior strategy or technique or tactic in front of the children. When you do that, you inform the child, who is very intelligent. African children are supremely intelligent. Once you inform them that you do not agree over how the behavior should be managed, that child has now been empowered by the parents to manipulate you two against one another so that he or she can get whatever they want. You see this a lot when the parents don't live together. Mom is no longer in the house, dad is no longer in the house, and they don't communicate. And the child, although this is not psychologically healthy, although this is not emotionally healthy for the child, okay, will manipulate the fact that mom and dad do not communicate. They will manipulate that so that they can achieve their own agenda. So they will play mom off of dad and dad off of mom so they can get their way with both parents. And this is another problem we run into when the parents try to get the children to take sides against each other when they are no longer living in a home. I've seen this through therapy. I see this in the schools. I see this clinically when the parents want the child to take their side. So guess what happens when we want the child to take our side? What happens is we get weak on the discipline. We start slacking up on the consistency because we want our son or daughter to side with us against the other parent. And because there is a war going on between the two parents, okay, there's a war going on between the two parents. So what we do is we involve the child in this war. We back up, slack up off the discipline, which means our parenting skills have now been weakened because we need our son or daughter to take sides with us against the other parent. This is not how you raise children. This is not how you raise children. Y'all need to agree to disagree on certain things. So, what is Dr. Umar Johnson's recommendation for how parents can get beyond the fact that they don't agree on discipline? It's a real simple rule. A very, very simple rule. If I don't agree with my daughter's mother on discipline, the rule that we're going to follow is simply this. Whenever she gives a consequence or a reward, I agree not to interfere with it. Did you hear me, fathers? Whenever the mother of your children gives a consequence or a reward, you will agree not to interfere with that consequence or reward. You might not like it. You could talk to the mother about that consequence and reward later, but you have no right to interfere with that consequence or reward. And the same thing goes with the mom. If mom doesn't agree, okay, with the father's technique for dealing with misbehavior, then mom should discuss it with dad. But you do not have the power to remove, alter, or modify the other parent's consequence or reward, no matter how much you don't like it. If we follow this rule, the mother never has to worry about the father stepping on her toes, and the father never has to worry about the mother stepping on his. Now, let's get back to behavior. Let's talk about punishment and reward. Punishment and reward. First of all, let's be clear, okay? And this is for my educators out there, my principals, my teachers, okay? And you guys know I'm a former school administrator, certified school principal, master of educational leadership, doctor of clinical psychology, certified school psychologist. But let me say this, out of school suspension is not a consequence. Out of school suspension is not a consequence. There is no child on the planet Earth, not in South Africa, okay? Not in Johannesburg, not in Cape Town, not in Durban, not in Pretoria, not in the Western Cape, not in the Eastern Cape, not in Mississippi, not in Texas, not in Michigan, not in Illinois. There is no child, not in Australia, not in London, not in Canada, not in Toronto, Montreal, not in St. Croix, St. Thomas, not in Jamaica, not in Haiti, not in Cuba, not in Puerto Rico, not in Haiti. There is no African child who feels punished because the school sent them home for a couple of days because they misbehaved in school. This is not a consequence. Schools do it. And when I travel around educating principals and teachers, I always talk about the fact that sending kids home is only going to reward the misbehavior. Why? Because 2/3 of our children are being raised by mothers. 2/3 of our children are being raised by their mothers. So if 2/3 of the children are being raised by their mothers, which means mom is at work, and if she's not working, she's busy trying to take care of the basic necessities of the family. Okay? How is she in any place whatsoever to provide punishment, consequence, behavioral redirection to her child? It's ridiculous. In a reality where most black kids are being raised by the mother in European context, sending the kids home for misbehavior changes nothing, but it does reinforce the misbehavior. Okay? In order to understand this, you have to understand the definition of punishment and the definition of reward. Let's talk about the definition of punishment. Punishment is anything you give or take away from a child that is designed to reduce the occurrence of the misbehavior. Let me say this again. Punishment is anything you give or take away from a child that is designed to reduce misbehavior. Sending a child home for a day of PlayStation and a day of online pornography, or a day of eating whatever they want or watching whatever they want, that is not punishment, that is reward. In fact, the child might go home and engage in the same misbehavior again so they can get another vacation day. And it makes absolutely no sense to be giving teenagers out of school suspension. Giving a teenager out of school suspension, that is ridiculous. What time is it? 11:30, 12, 1, 2. Greetings, Baba. It's time to go. I think it's almost time for Dr. Umar Johnson to head on over to the Market Theater here in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's time to roll?
Yes, my brother.
Okay, I'm going to finish this up. 2 minutes.
No
yes.
problem.
Is Sister Nafisa ready?
No, where's she now?
No, room 7.
Thank you. I'll go there now.
All right, Baba. So, then, don't send the kids home. Okay? In-school suspension is much more effective than out-of-school suspension if it is done right. If it is done right, in-school suspension is much better than out-of-school suspension. And then when we talk about reward is anything you give or take away from a child that is designed to increase behavior, designed to increase. And I want to end on this because I got to get on over to the theater here in Johannesburg. I want to say that as it relates to reward, never reward a child every time they do something right. Never reward a child every time they do something right. They have to earn the reward. They have to earn the reward. So they have to reach a certain behavioral threshold. In other words, you get your reward because you had 3 good days out of 5. You get your reward because you had 4 good days out of 5. You get your reward because you had 7 good days out of 10. You get your reward because you had 20 good days out of 30. You must earn the reward. You don't reward a child every time they do something right. So on that note, brothers and sisters, I'm going to have to cut this video short. I'm going to pick up on this probably when I come back tonight or probably tomorrow. Virginia State University. You will be my first stop when I get back to the United States, God willing. Ancestor providing, I will be at Virginia State, November the 3rd. Morgan State University, February the 22nd. Memphis, University of Memphis, November the 19th for the Black Men's Conference, Men of Color Conference. Shout out to the University of Memphis. Orlando, Florida. Orlando, Saturday, November the 5th. You will be my second visit when I come home. Excuse me. Columbus, Georgia. November the 22nd. Turks and Caicos Island, November the 14th to the 17th. Okay, what else we got coming up? London, I'm working on you, London. Queens, New York. What is that? What is Queens? Queens is December. I got Queens right after Elizabeth, New Jersey. But better yet, Black family, thanks to all those who support Dr. Umar Johnson. Appreciate the love. Make sure you donate to the school, FDMG Academy, P.O. Box 6872, Philadelphia, PA 19132, FDMG Academy, P.O. Box 6872, Philadelphia, PA 19132. You got a speaking request, you can email that to drumarspeaks@yahoo.com or drumarspeaks@gmail.com. Other issues, you can email my assistant, Dr. Umar Assistant @yahoo.com. If you want to reach me directly, Dr. Umar Johnson @yahoo.com. Shout out to all the Garveyites, shout out to all the Pan-Africanists, shout out to Team Pan-African, shout out to the whole unapologetically African movement. Market Theater, Johannesburg, Prince of Pan-African is on his way. Ashe.